Hello, my esteemed colleagues. Happy Monday and welcome to advisory number 2 for teachers. I hope you guys are enjoying your day at home. I promise this video is not going to be nearly as long as last time, but we are going to talk about the 3 categories that we do every teacher advisory, which will be student advisory, teaching practices, and work-life balance. Let's get into it. For the student advisory portion today, I wanted to talk about accessibility and troubleshooting when it comes to the advisory lessons. First, let's talk about language accessibility. As you know, we've got a lot of students that either don't speak much English, don't speak English at all, or are learning English and just not confident with it yet. And so I've tried to make advisory as accessible as possible in both English and Spanish. One way we do that is to make sure that I have the English slides in blue and the Spanish slides in green, as always. But something that I also want to point out when it comes to the YouTube videos for our English learners is to remind you that YouTube has automatic captions and it will translate them for you. At the bottom right of every YouTube video, you have the opportunity to turn on closed captioning and it will have auto-generated subtitles. Most of the time they are reliable. They at least get the gist across, although they might not always be super accurate because I'm a mumbler and I speak too fast and I'm working on it. You can change those subtitles to Spanish by going right next to it on settings, go over to subtitles, English auto-generated, and you can do auto-translate into darn near every single language that exists. So if I switch that to Spanish, then boom, Señor Hall en Español. And again, these are not always the closest. I'm using Google Translate on all of these things, and YouTube runs off of the same system. So if they're not altogether accurate, lo siento, soy gringo. Estoy haciendo mi mejor esfuerzo. So make sure to offer that to your students if you have a large number, or really any students that are still at the early stages of learning English. Secondly, if you're leaving sub plans for the day, or if you're not going to be there, try your best to steer them towards advisory. I'm also going to work on a one-pager for them to hand out at the office whenever they are handing subs rosters and things like that. And we know that some subs will do it, some subs will not, but we're going to throw a wide net because as much as possible, we don't want students to miss the information or the lessons. So just include, if you have a 3rd or 8th period, for your subs to pull that up, or if you want to elect a advisory advocate or something like that in your class whenever you leave, students can also access the entirety of the lessons. They can find it at Longhorn Country,
where all the magic happens.
Right there under advisory. If they scroll down, they'll see Q3 advisory slides just like you guys see on your website. And they also have a suggestion box for them to leave any sort of feedback about advisory. So they can also access these things. They can even access the YouTube channel directly. So if students ever miss advisory, there's a way for them to access it. And if you are ever out, if you want to make sure that a student is in charge of advisory, maybe a fun leadership opportunity. And then finally, if you are having some sort of issue with your boards or your computer or YouTube or the slides or anything like that, please don't suffer in silence. Let me know as soon as possible. Sometimes I can figure it out. I know that everybody's setup is different. I will say that the most reliable connection to me has always been a good old-fashioned HDMI cord in my computer. But if your smart boards are smart enough, then you can just access advisory through the browser and have it up so it's always there ready for you, ready to go. If you have any consistent troubles with your board or with anything tech related, then there's going to be an opportunity in the accompanying form to this video to let me know about those things. All right, secondly, let's talk about teaching by going over some discussion strategies specifically for ELLs. The other day at New Teacher Academy, they had a presenter that was talking all about strategies for scaffolding and acquiring more class participation with your ELLs. And even though this presentation was specific to ELLs, so many of the strategies that are found in this presentation can help any class that is trying to increase engagement. Now, I've shared this presentation with you, but this is exactly what they saw. And if you want to make your own copy of it, you can by clicking on this bit.ly. And while the formatting was really for that particular presentation, there are still lots of good links to lots of good resources. So much of this is set up for taking notes in the moment, but don't miss some of these other good things that are in there. the examples that they used for these activities and the rubrics. There's some real good stuff that starts on slide 18, which talks about the implementation of some of these strategies. So on the left here, it says to provide authentic, purposeful opportunities to interact through speaking, listening, reading, and writing. It's important to build a classroom culture of authentic communication about their learning. And then here are some strategies that help with that authentic communication. For instance, this activity gives a lot of sentence stems to spark conversation between students. If you want help establishing systems and routines that students know how to use consistently, that is huge. This one talks about using some of the colors to assign roles in discussion. And if you want to provide purposeful supports and scaffold, there are consensus sentence stems right here with tiered proficiency levels. Some examples of some visuals that you can put alongside your questions to help them understand more. Specifically with English learners that know Spanish, there are some examples of what are called perfect cognates, which are words that are the exact same in English and Spanish. And then the other slides have close cognates and then false cognates, where it says these words are similar but have different significances. I learned a lot clicking through this one. On slide 19, you have a few other links, one of which was really interesting to me, which is the 3 moments in a lesson matrix. It says a well-scaffolded lesson can be conceptualized in 3 moments: preparing learners, interacting with the concept or the skill or the text, and then extending understanding. And down here, it says all sorts of instructional strategies for each of those moments. And so if that helps you organize your lesson, I think best in 3s, then you can use this framework as well. It goes on to talk about how to access further activities in Elevation, but it has a ton of great resources and links to great resources. And so I would highly suggest that you look to this if you're stuck or need some inspiration when it comes to engaging your students authentically in class. And then lastly, as always, we're going to talk about work-life balance. But for this topic, I need you to come with me. Nice. Sometimes you just need a change of scenery. So for the work-life balance part, I want us to think a little bit about productive rest. This job and just being in a school day after day takes a lot of energy. And so it takes a lot to replenish that energy. And lately I've been trying to be conscious in my own life about more productive ways of resting, because I am very lazy, like very, very lazy. If it wouldn't be detrimental to both my mental and physical health to stay on the couch until the end of time, I assure you I would do it. And sometimes I find myself in a cycle of just go to work, come home, watch Sopranos, go to work, come home, play video games, go to work, come home, sit on the couch. But I really want us to think intentionally about the ways that we rest that really recharge us and to help maintain a life outside of school. So when I think of productive rest, these are the types of things that I think of. First up is exercise, which is what we're doing right now. It's antithetical to what we think of as rest, but you got to move your body. It's big for mood, it's big for helping sleep, which of course unlocks all sorts of things. So even if we're drained mentally or emotionally at the end of the day, if we still have some physical energy left over, we probably ought to use it for something that helps us in the long run. And it doesn't have to be super intense. The most exercise I get in a given week is usually just walking this guy. The second thing I can think of when it comes to productive rest is engaging your brain in learning something new or engaging in a hobby. It's also antithetical to rest, but it is very important for us to not only use our creative energies and our just general energy only at our job. Obviously, it doesn't have to be musical, but something that is an individual pursuit that you do for almost no other reason other than to do it can be an actual form of rest, in my opinion. Check this out. The third thing I think of when I think of productive rest is chores. Or if the word chores triggers you a little bit, you can think of it as life maintenance. I've got these dishes here. I've got a pile of laundry in there, and it's not going to do itself. And even when I'm super, super exhausted, often I have just enough energy to get something menial done. My dishes time is usually like the last thing that I do before I go to bed. And it's not necessarily because I have all this extra energy at the end of the day. It's just that I know that waking up tomorrow with an empty sink and clean dishes will make me happy. And when you work a very stressful job like teaching, you need all of the dopamine hits you can get. Because that's really what all this stuff does, like exercise or hobbies or chores. It's not typically thought of as rest, but it does rest the work part of your brain and helps you to focus in on just your life. And I don't know, it helps me feel more like a human being than just a machine that goes to work and comes back home and goes back to work. A teaching machine. So those are some things that come to my mind when I think of productive rest and being intentional with my time at home, especially during a busy week. And the fourth one is